flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice. All right, moving on to item number 3, public comment. There is no public comment. Item 4, approval of the January 9th, 24 Infrastructure Committee meeting minutes. Motion by Jensen. Second by Hardinger. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item 5, policy issues, discussion, potential committee determination. There are none. And at this time, I would, without objection, Commissioner Griesbach needs to depart soon, so what I would like to do is move on to items 7A, C, and D without objection. All right, hearing none, we'll move on to 7A, educational presentation and committee discussion update on Marathon County Highway Safety Commission quarterly meeting. Jim, you have the table.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the opportunity, going a little bit early. I got a buzz out by 10, and I didn't know how long the meeting is going to run here today. So for the update on the Highway Safety Commission quarterly meeting, we actually just had that yesterday. So in the past 3 months, we only had one fatal, thankfully, in Marathon County. That was a accident on State Highway 52 and Highway X. They are just wrapping up the reports right now. Where a car turned in front of a semi. Drivers heading westbound on 52 turned south on Highway X. At this point, they just feel it was a case of distracted driver. One thing that happened out there is the Sheriff's Department now has new equipment to help remap and reconstruct the accident. So the reconstruction lasted 4 hours instead of the normal 6 to 8. So it's great when we can get the roads back open and get the people back to their normal jobs. Again, like our highway department, we're out there for detours, so 4 hours is a lot better than the 6 to 8. The DOT also reported out that there's 18 projects going on this summer on the big system. I-39 from Bull Jr. to Business 51 is having a 2.5-inch surface cap put on that road. There is a agreement with the State Patrol. They'll be mitigating. So what that means is the State Patrol is paid to sit out in that on that stretch of roadway during construction. So they will be patrolling that heavily. On Highway 29 from the Clark County line to E westbound, there's a 9-mile section of patch, rut, and surface repairs. It's about $7 to $8 million project. Highway 29 from Purple Martin Road by Marathon there to Wausau, that is going to be resurfaced. And then there's also some bridge deck overpasses on 107 and Highway 97 that are getting polymer overlays. You'll have this packet in your packet from the Marathon County Traffic Commission. Just some things to report out. On page 2, you notice that this shows a 5-year average, and it's kind of shaded with the dark blue and the light blue. That one right there, David. Thank you. The dark blue represents the accidents in 24. The light blue is the 5-year average. So you see we were down with accidents, and injuries are up just a little bit in 24. On the next page, all these maps can be generated and found, again, in Community Maps. If you go into Community Maps, if you need some help, let us know. The 5-year average on page 3, you can see the pedestrians about the same. Motorcycles are down. Commercial vehicles are up just a tad. However, the bicycles were up 81%. I think that just means you have more people out there participating in that. Other crash flags, one thing was, as expected, third one down, fourth one down. Winter road was down 45%. With the winter we had last year, that was expected that we would be down greatly with that. Unfortunately, work zone accidents, we had to tick back up 30%. We're doing everything in our possible out there to mitigate those, but they continue to happen. On page 4, they can run analytics. So what they do is they put in with volumes of traffic, work zones, everything's going beyond. They can predict the hotspots for the year. So those black areas, you will see the hotspots, where they feel that are areas that they'll be patrolling a little bit more this year. I am going to skip all the way up to, because the rest of them are just different areas that they have picked. If you want to flip all the way to page 15, which gives you the daily fatality report. The report says through January 31st. My report was a little bit earlier. Yep, it says 31st. The numbers he gave us were actually through February 4th. So the crashes for the year were, did he update his? No. The crashes were 48 and 51 fatalities. You can see that number is up from last year, the 21 crashes and 24 fatalities. Again, that's a lot to do with the winter, how it contributes to the roads, that we had a very mild winter last year, and the roads were great. If you want to flip to page 19 in the report, just because we do have a large Mennonite Amish showing in Marathon County, they do have the statewide numbers from 2018 through 24. The solid blue line shows the amount of people injured, and the numbers on the left are the injured. The numbers on the right represent killed. So you can see we did have all but 2022, there was somebody killed with a horse and buggy. And if you flip over to the next page, on page 20, it just shows the type of accidents. If it was a front to rear, that's the majority of accidents where people are coming up upon them due to poor lighting. And everybody did acknowledge the both communities are working on the lightings on the horse and buggy, so they do seem to be improving. So hopefully we see a downward trend. That is a report from yesterday for the Traffic Commission's quarterly meeting. If there's any questions? Right, I will skip B. We'll come back to that. Kevin will handle that one a little bit later. Status of the site to visit to Eau Claire Highway Department. I sent an email, and John forwarded on to the Finance Committee for the February 17th trip. I've spoken to a few of you. A few of you haven't gotten back to me yet, but we would like to get a nice contingency together to tour that facility, so we have a good comparison, so you can see what a modern shop actually does look like. So I don't know if I'll need those by Monday so we can start arranging vehicles. So far from this committee, I only have Chair Dickinson committed. We know we talked that you're trying to clear your schedule. Tom cannot make it. I talked to Chris Voll. He can't make it. Gary. It's going to be Monday. It's a Monday, February 17th. So it's something you would really enjoy. All right, thank you. And for my highway update, a lot of it does have to do with the building facility. So what the steps I have made so far is we met with the selected realtor and worked on a strategy of the purchase of land offers. We have, as of yesterday, I received the appraisal for this property. We met with Noah Phillips. Is it Phillips Appraisal? Phillips Appraisal. He's going to work on some land values of our existing site. He's going to give it to me a couple ways, without any improvements, or with all of our improvements that are there, or just with the newer buildings, which includes the existing medical examiner's office, and right behind that's a newer storage unit. So he's going to give it to me a few different ways. We're also asking in his analysis, what would be the taxable valuation of the entire area if it was redeveloped into a high-density housing? So hopefully we'll have all those numbers for our March meeting. I did receive an updated cost estimate from a construction company on the proposed building that we're having. Again, it's just preliminary buildings. It's not final. We're not going to get a true final cost on that till after construction, if we would build. This estimate's just off a line drawing. It's not off even final plans, but we do have an updated estimate which better aligns to the Eau Claire facility that we're going to go look at. So it's I believe it's a very good realistic estimate. I'm working with both Craig and Chris from Building Maintenance on different repairs and what should be done at our existing facility if we do stay, and some updated cost on those. The other thing we worked on for our March meeting, I am working on developing talking points of why a new highway shop is needed. Develop talking points on the operation efficiencies gained from a new highway facility. And again, we got that scheduled to Eau Claire on February 17th. Besides the site building, just one other thing to report on is a lot of people, it's been in the news a lot about the ARIP, the Agriculture Road Improvement Program. Just to let you know, 3 communities just received their state agreements, and they come out at midnight. They got them today. Excuse me, McMillan has received a $1.5 million project, with their local share will be $192,987. The town of Hull received the project for $2.4 million, local share of $304,449, and the town of Marathon received a $2.7 million project with their local share of $337,635. So Marathon County did outstanding in that round of applications. That is all I have to report at this time. If there's any questions, I will take them now.
Supervisor Sorbert?
Thank you. Jim, I'd like to know on appraised values. Now, a while ago, there was a piece of property that was foreclosed on, and that value was appraised way higher than what the independent appraisers came through. Do we have an appraisal on the old facility?
That's what I'm talking to Noah Phillips on. That's what he's working on.
On that old, but how many properties adjacent to that are overappraised right now? How many, yeah, I'm sure you don't know this, but I mean, if one property comes out, I don't know how many thousands and thousands of dollars overappraised they were over the years, paying property tax. And now all of a sudden the appraisal comes through a lot less than what the county's surveyor or assessor came through. Just how many other properties, neighboring properties, are being overassessed? It's just a question.
So, if I may, Mr. Chair, I think, thank you. Your question, I think I understand, but please let me know if I'm missing the mark. It very clearly, you bring up a great point, the difference between assessed value and appraised value, and the tie between an assessed value for purposes of tax generation and appraised value that talks about the building improvements and the land values. Currently, the shop that Jim operates out of, we're going to get appraisals. And the important thing is there, great example, the highway department, the appraisal will come back that it will have a significant value to not only the land, but also the buildings that are on each of those individual parcels that make up that overall area on West Street. However, for purposes of tax assessment, last I checked, Jim and his team do not pay taxes into the county coffers. So to your point, that's why we asked when we sat down and said, what do we think might be helpful to the committee, and particularly HR Finance as well. They had a conversation about, how do we want to ultimately look at opportunities to fund any new shop or a relocation of the West Street shop. Part of that was, what if we redeployed that land to a taxable use? So that's what we have Mr. Phillips looking at. Not only, as Jim said, what are the land values, what are the building improvements on the current site, but if you did redeploy that property, and it was a question that was raised at HR Finance, if you redeployed that property to a taxable use, to your point, what might that assessment look like, and what might that generate for taxable value? So Mr. Phillips is going to try to do that. again, there's a lot of science, but I'm sure some of that is art. The use that currently is foreseen in the West Side Master Plan, of course, is to maintain that as government-owned property, which would not generate tax revenue. But the idea that perhaps an alternative, because again, the West Side Master Plan is not set in stone, it's simply a plan. You can change that plan if you redeveloped it into, as Jim said, housing, which is the adjacent use in that area. There's certainly some commercial, but there's some housing, and it's adjacent to Marathon Park, so it makes logical sense. What might that taxable valuation be, and what then might the county see from that taxable valuation? Because again, generally speaking, the county receives about 18 to 20% of the tax bill of any parcels in the city of Wausau. The remaining portions get broken up against those other taxable jurisdictions. So I don't know, to your specific question about does this work really impact the assessed value of the adjacent parcels? I think the short answer is no, because again, we're talking about appraised value, and then if the property were redeveloped or reutilized for some other purpose, what might the county see from ongoing revenues? So that was the thought process behind engaging Mr. Phillips. I don't know if that helps, Supervisor Sorper.
The second part of that question is the property we're looking at buying or purchasing. What is their tax role? I mean, what are they paying into the county, the state, the towns that we're going to be losing if we take over that property?
And I think you can recall who the owners, at least of a portion of those are. I'm not going to talk about them because that hasn't been talked about in open session. But at a high level, remembering who pays tax, right? Governments don't. If property is held by government, nonprofit entities don't pay tax. And then, of course, all of us as individuals, generally speaking, we do. So from that high-level ownership structure and tax structure, you'll recall it's a mix, but a fair portion of that is non-taxable right now. That, if you recall the parcels we're talking about.
I mean, is there a figure? I mean, we can talk that some is taxable, some is, I mean, there's got to be a figure of how much we're losing by taking that property over, how much in tax money we're giving up.
Absolutely, and I think when we go into closed session, again, Jim has indicated we have that realtor. We're going to have those appraised values for the parcels that are taxable, and we have a very firm number from the owner of the non-taxable parcels. So next step, that county board presentation that you, both your committee and HR Finance asked for in March, we're trying to get as much of that information, and we'll have that taxable value for you there. I don't want to talk about it necessarily in open session if we could identify what parcels those are, but absolutely we can get you the taxable value for the currently taxable portions, and we can talk about the price that we believe we could get those properties for.
Thank you.
And thank you for bringing up the West Side Master Plan, because that was going to be my question. In part of that master plan, isn't there some housing as part of that land already, or is it just the ice rink? Do you recall?
My recollection is that it used to be, there was a desire to have that property reutilized for the Parks Department, but when the board adopted the revised master plan, excuse me, that the current use foreseen, or the anticipated use, was for ice arena reconstruction and for, there were pickleball courts that were going to be moved from inside the Marathon Park current boundaries to outside. So it was park-related use. But again, I think there's a concurrent conversation going. I think many of you likely know about refurbishing or planning for future improvements to the ice arenas that exist within Marathon Park. And I think it's entirely reasonable in light of kind of how that conversation is going. Again, it's a policy question for the board, but those facilities may very well remain within the existing Marathon Marathon Park boundary. So you could easily, very easily amend that master plan, as was the discussion at the time. The master plan is a vision. As circumstances change, you certainly can amend that master plan. And if the desire is, in light of current priorities of the board, for both funding reasons and also to address housing concerns, to have that redeveloped to housing, that was why we wanted to at least present you that valuation information that Jim is working on getting with Mr. Phillips. I hope that answers the question. But my recollection was it was taking park-related uses that are currently happening inside the Marathon Park existing footprint, like ice and pickleball courts, moving those external to that West Street property.
The other thought I had, is there any kind of movement of funds from one department to another to compensate, which would reduce the cost to the highway department? So would, in essence, if we stayed with the master plan and the rink and we were giving up, the highway department's giving up that land and the parks department is taking it over, I mean, it's just is there any kind of transfer of money between departments to balance that out? It's just a thought that popped in my mind, if that makes sense.
I think I understand your question. The short answer, no. If it stays in government hands, somebody doesn't buy it from the other. You know, I think it's reasonable to assume that if we maintained West Street and redeployed it as was anticipated under the existing West Side Master Plan, the cost actually to do that to the county overall actually goes up because you're expanding your footprint. You have a larger operational footprint to maintain. You'd have to construct the additional ice arenas there, which is going to come at a cost, which they're talking about at Park Commission and is going to be moved through various committees relatively shortly. But if you redevelop it and actually divest, which I think was the request that we get some information on from HR Finance and Property, if you divest and it were to be used for housing, for example, that would, assuming again the housing is held in a for-profit or not nonprofit, non-taxable, under a non-taxable entity, that would result in additional tax revenue for the county. Even a housing project that receives low-income housing tax credits does have a taxable valuation. So I think it was a very astute question from, I believe it was Vice Chair Marshall that kind of brought up the idea, what if that were redeployed as housing? Wouldn't that bring some revenue in? So that kind of spurred our engagement with Mr. Phillips. I hope that, again, answers your question.
Supervisor Jensen.
Thank you. Two questions. So the first would be, will there be or has there been a kind of an environmental study done on that property that might impact our ability to rezone it into housing or something else? Like I'm thinking chemical spills, leaches, things like that, that either the county would be on the hook for or it would have to be disclosed for a sale from that property.
We have not done one recently. We put on our addition in 1992. We did have some contamination at that point. We did clean that all up. There's no other ones that are known. I don't know if they did one with the cold storage when we took that over the far west. I believe they also did one on that, but otherwise the rest of the site, we would still have to do that investigation. But any ones that we've known where we had issue, that was cleaned up in 91, 92, somewhere there.
Okay, thanks. And then,
Supervisor Sorbit, or I'm sorry, Supervisor Jensen, go ahead, please.
thank you. The other question would be for a rezone to residential or commercial, would that then move the, I guess, municipality jurisdiction over to city first, like its first right of refusal to take that on before we actually sold that to a private party?
There's no statutory requirement that if the county is divesting that we have to offer to the municipality. I would say it's been my experience over the last 8 years in administration that when we have property that the county owns, there is a fair amount, a significant amount actually, of engagement with the municipality on what that's going to look like. The short answer to your question is yes, if it was going to be divested, the county was going to, straight up, we put out an RFP, people answer it, and we sell it. It's incumbent upon the purchaser of that property to work through any existing processes relative to rezoning. That would, of course, then go to the city. So the best example of that is actually we just recently sold. The board approved selling a portion of county-owned property adjacent to the UW Stevens Point Wausau campus, a parking lot. We did sell that to the city. They still nevertheless have to go through their rezone process to rezone that, and their intent is to put that into housing. So short answer, yes, it would. There's not a first right of refusal, but the municipality jurisdiction controls. The only exception to that relative to the zoning of a municipality applying is really in a township where the county owns the property. We have some powers of what I'll call preemption over existing town zoning.
Thank you.
Supervisor Sorba.
Thank you. Jim, I have a question on the satellite stations. Now, a lot of board members don't know how many satellite stations are out there. And is it 5 or 7 or what's the number?
We have 5 shops total, including the Wausau, so 4 satellites.
4 satellites. So on what's the wish list of the 4 satellite stations over the next 10 years? What needs are they going to need? Are we going to take care of those needs when we redo a new shop? And
So the satellite shops are Stratford, which is one of our main shops. We have a lot of people based out of the Stratford shop. So I'll talk mainly with the satellite shops that we closed during the summer. We have one in Hatley and one in Abbotsford. Both of those shops are relatively new, built in mid-90s. So we are maintaining those. The other shop that needs a lot of attention is the Mosinee shop, which, working with Brian in Central Wisconsin Airport and the FAA, we will need to close that one down at some point. They haven't been knocking Brian's door down yet for us to move that. If we would move the proposed facility, we would close that facility because this one is in a general area that we could close that one down and not have to worry about rebuilding it. If we do stay at our existing site, we will need to find land. Hopefully Brian would have some land for us and build a new facility. So that one's kind of, the Mosinee shop is kind of critical, tied to the new location. Projection from an engineering firm, this to build a 4-bay shop with salt storage and material storage, fuel islands, and a scale. You're probably looking at about a $5 million investment.
If I can add one thing, in terms of planning, that's a great question. We are currently implementing an asset management tool to try to do what I think you're talking about, better forecast. And I'll circle back. I don't have an answer today, but I will at your next meeting. I'll talk to Chris, see where they're at in that process. I know Jim's team is going to be involved in that. Talk to Deputy Holman and see what our timeline is to have a better understanding on that. But I think to Jim's point, the only thing that I'm aware of kind of that's more pressing than the rest is really the Mosinee piece beyond the West Street shop. But I'll circle back. That's a very good question.
thank you.
Anything further? All right. Thank you, Jim, for those updates. What I'd like to do is to just stay within 7 so we can get through these presentations and discussions without objection. Item B would be results from the County Highway O, County Highway U intersection.
Okay, I can take that on. This year, we're planning on replacing the pavement on Highway U west of Highway O. And we had some concerns come up to us from one of our retired deputies who lives out in that area, as well as some of the town folks that intersection, there's a lot of cars that are missing those stop signs out there. So we had an investigation on that. The firm that's working on Highway X and XX study, they took a look at this one for us as well. They set up a camera system out there that they have and kind of monitor rather than going off of a periodic spot check or kind of reports from people. They were able to kind of set up those cameras and then monitor the traffic that was out there. They did find there were quite a few vehicles that were kind of doing rolling stops out there, but didn't see that presence of people totally missing the stop sign. There are some some structural things out there that they did recommend for low-cost countermeasures, so we plan on implementing those. First one was pavement markings, just to enhance the stop-ahead signs that are out there. So we did purchase some stencils for those, and our crews will be installing those countermeasures this year as part of that project. And then if you're able to go to page 13 packet, does kind of show probably the worst leg for vision on there when you're heading westbound up to the stop sign. You can kind of see that stop sign is set way back. This intersection, years ago when it was built, has very wide turn lanes in it. Most of our county highways on a road like this just have a standard 35, 40-foot radius coming off of it. This one has a full lane taper that moves over and pushes that stop sign. It's probably about 18 feet out from the edge of the fog line versus the 7 to 8 that they normally are. So when we're in there doing our work, we're probably going to bring that lane in and be able to pull that stop sign so it's a little bit more aligned with traffic so they'll see it. And then we'll probably put double stop signs up there just to give more awareness to the cars that are out there. But basically in their study, they found they weren't seeing people totally blowing through the stop sign. It was probably more of the local people who are doing rolling stops through there that were causing the issue. So, as a side note, about 2 weeks after we got these guys rolling on this one, I happened to be driving through there and followed a minivan that just went straight through the stop sign. So I was like, okay, it does happen out here. So I don't drive that a lot and was able to just drive through there once and had that experience personally. So, any questions on that one?
Just to add on, Kevin did mention the Highway X and Double X's firm is doing that same study. I spoke to them this morning. They plan on getting Kevin and I a preliminary footprint yet this week. We're going to sit down with them next week and finalize some things. So we should have that report ready for a March meeting.
Questions? The question I would have is, we brought up Highway E and 157 in the past. 153, I'm sorry. I'm moving along here. 153, 54, 55. The question in this case, and this is a T intersection, is that it's a four-way, okay. What is the thought of doing rumble strips on this road? Putting those in similar to something that's come up with Highway E? And is that maybe a plan to be thinking about in a lot of these intersections that are being highlighted as risk?
So what we do is we take a look at, you brought up the 153 and E for an example. We take a look at the cause of the accidents a lot of times. For example, the 153 and E, we did have the fatality. The second accident was somebody lost their brakes and didn't have brakes. So does rumble strips help that or not? The second thing we'll take a look at is residential areas. Many people don't care if they have the rumble strips after they have their homes, and there's some there's a pretty nice subdivision right at this location, and I don't know if they would appreciate rumble strips through the night either. So we need to take a look at the intersection, what type of accidents there are, and if they're rolling stops, rumble strips don't really help those either. So we need to take a look at the accidents, the cause before we start putting those in.
And that's not planned for this intersection, correct?
No, they're not.
Okay. Other questions? Thank you. Moving on then to item E, CCIT project update.
The information is in your packet. One of the things I can tell you that we'll be spending quite a bit of time on this year is office moves. We will be starting the end of February, I think. I'm sure Administrator Leonard can address this, but we have 9 moves over 9 weeks. And then the other big project we're involved in is the Regional Forensic Science Center, which is coming along quite well. So that'll be pretty heavy focus, April, May, June, July. Any questions on the project packet? I'd be glad to answer them.
No, looks good. Thank you. Moving on then to item F, CWA airport update. Brian.
Thank you, Chair Dickinson. Just a few updates.
Microphone.
Yes.
Thank you, Chair Dickinson. Just a few updates. First is we did have a newsworthy event here earlier in the week. I imagine you're all curious about that. We had a plane come in, not scheduled to land at Central Wisconsin Airport. It was a private jet, 7 people on board, had a cracked windshield. That was about the extent of the issue. Came in, declared an emergency out of an abundance of caution because there is certainly a real potential to lose pressurization. They did not lose any pressure. They did deploy their masks, again, out of an abundance of caution. Came in, landed without incidents. Filed a report. Tower did a report as well, and well, they were basically out of there before the news got on site. I was able to talk to the news, but all in all, a pretty short, pretty quick event. As it relates to infrastructure, we did just open our transient hangar project bids. This would be Wednesday, January 22nd. I can say bids came in extremely well. Our engineers, architects' opinion of probable costs for the hangar was $3.8 million, with the bids ranging between 2.8 and 5.5 million. So of course the apparent low bid right now is Urban Construction for a total price of $2,859,966.77. So great price. What is being used to fund that is our BIL, Bipartisan Infrastructure Law funding. It's an allocated amount right now based on 5 years. It'll be 6 years coming up here at the end of September. But that really helps the rest of our plans to use that fund. So the hangar is the first step of the project. The next is a new a new general aviation terminal building. That will be bidding out later on this spring as well. And if bids come in as well, this plan, that's part of the airport master plan that was completed a couple years ago, will be ahead of schedule and under budget, which is something we don't say real often. So very excited about that. Other items, just on the air service note, American Airlines, you may have seen that a couple weeks ago, did announce they are going to be upgauging aircraft into Central Wisconsin Airport. It will start March 6th. We'll see a Embraer 170. American configures that as a 65-seat regional jet. The significance there is it'll be a dual-class jet. So now American Airlines will be offering first-class service to their customers and our customers. The product will be very similar to what Delta is currently offering with service to Chicago. Starting in March, they'll begin to transition out the 50 seat. So March 6th will be one turn on that larger aircraft. Then they'll slowly build up those aircraft and transition out the 50 seat. Then by June 5th, we will be 3 daily flights on that 65-seat Embraer 170 aircraft. And right now that is for the foreseeable future. That equates to approximately about a 50% increase in seats on American. So a pretty significant increase. With that, we'll see more options and certainly better prices. So looking very forward to that. That completes my report, Mr. Chair, unless there's any questions for me.
The one question I was going to have is, can you explain the benefits, the uses of the transient hangar in the general aviation terminal?
Yeah, happy to. So this hangar is a very large hangar. It's sized for approximately a Gulfstream 650 size corporate aircraft. That is, for lack of a better term, the largest non-Boeing corporate aircraft flying. That is a frame of aircraft we see quite frequently here at Central Wisconsin Airport, particularly in the winter because of our snow removal. There's a lot of national and quite honestly global companies that come through, have businesses not only in central Wisconsin but northern Wisconsin, where in the winter our snow removal really is the level of snow removal we have really is their best and only choice in some instances. In Wisconsin, there's very, very few hangars that size. So they'll come through, they'll sit out. Everybody wants to be in hangar, but they just can't be. So we see that as a great business opportunity for the airport and the FBO, something that we're currently lacking in. And the FBO I've spoken to as recently as this week. They've already got customers lined up ready to use it. I will say it is a transient hangar, so we're not planning on basing anybody there. This is truly for somebody that drops in. This cracked windshield example would be a prime example. That's where they would go until the aircraft is fixed and be able to leave and open it up for somebody else when the situation arises.
And then the terminal?
The terminal building is for general aviation as well. That's a common misconception, so thank you for asking that. It is not situated with the passenger terminal building. It's a separate structure altogether. Still on the north side of the airfield, but over on the east side of the north side of the airfield. It's really the FBO function. It's where people flight train. It's where these corporate aircraft come in to do whatever business they have. Pilots could wait there while their passengers go into Wausau, Stevens Point, where have you, for business. There will be a conference room, so potentially meetings could happen there. It's the business function terminal of the airport. Currently, we're operating in, I won't venture a guess, I don't have the numbers in front of me, a very small FBO that is very much outdated and does not meet the needs of the customers we're seeing right now. So this new terminal will meet the needs of those customers we're seeing at the Central Wisconsin Airport.
Very good. Thank you. Additional questions? All right. Thank you, Bert.
Thank you.
All right. Moving back up then to item 6, operational functions required by state ordinance, resolution, or policy. Item A, there are no items. Item B is discussion of possible action by infrastructure to forward to county board for consideration. Number 1 is the county endorsement on the ISP for BEAD project. Supervisor, I should say Chair of HR Finance.
And the Broadband Task Force.
And Broadband Task Force.
So this will be the last time I think I'll be coming before you on the Broadband Equity and Access Deployment Program for a while. The state is in the process of accepting applications for the $1.055 billion allocated to Wisconsin for serving on a statewide basis about 203,000-ish broadband service locations. It's approximately 8,443 in Marathon County. The state has identified 113 project units in Marathon County that are unserved or underserved, less than 25 megabytes per second of speed, and those would be the priorities going forward. So they started out at a process where they invited all the internet service providers to submit letters of intent and began discussions with them. Out of the 105 internet service providers statewide, 5 are active or interested in working in Marathon County. 5 out of 105 were invited. 32 actually submitted the letters, and 5 are interested in Marathon County. The ones that we as a task force and through Aaron Andrews and Jerry and myself have been reaching out to all internet service providers to try to get them interested. But we've heard from Frontier, Charter, Mosaic, Bertram, and Bug Tussle. There were some others. Country Wireless was looking, but they didn't submit an application or a final letter of intent. So those are the ones we're dealing with. The state will be accepting applications on through February 25th on round 1, which is fiber to the premise. They will go through and evaluate in each of those 113 project units. They've got some cost estimates. They're requesting that the internet service providers pay at least 25%, so there's a potential 75% match. And they've got different cost criteria. For instance, one project unit 110 may have a 147% figure. Project unit 109 might be 54%. We don't know what that 147% is of or what that 54% is of, so it's very difficult for us. In addition, there are some anti-collusion provisions in the federal legislation that prohibit the internet service providers from working together, which makes it difficult for the Broadband Task Force to do it because we have to try to honor those anti-collusion provisions while we're also complying with the open meetings law. As a result, when the Broadband Task Force invited those 5 parties, and we pointed out the anti-collusion provisions and suggested that the internet service providers leave the room when the others were presenting, which they all did. And then we discussed them. But round 1 of that BEAD process, we'll be looking at fiber to the premise. If there's only one application, PSC will give a preliminary award to that internet service provider. And then they're going to go, if there are multiple, they'll negotiate with them to try to get the best deal. And then they'll work through licensed fixed wireless, coaxial, cable, and then they'll go into alternative technologies such as satellite and unlicensed wireless until all of those 200,000 homes are served in the state of Wisconsin. They have to do that between now and July. In July, there will be a public meeting or a public hearing on the state's plan, which has to be submitted to the National Telephonics Information Administration in August. Based on our discussions, we invited the companies to submit. We heard formal proposals from Frontier looking to serve much of western Marathon County, but it is pretty much within their current footprint of service where they've got the copper wires. They didn't serve the far western part of the county or the northern part of the western county. Their application, I think, was limited because they can't, or they can only serve areas that were part of their 2022 Public Service Commission grant if there's no other providers interested. They withdrew that application. Therefore, they lost sort of their right to apply in that area because they, again, walked away from that project. We also had a proposal from Mosaic, which is a firm out of Cameron. They're doing a lot of work in Barron, Polk, and Chippewa counties. They're looking to come this way through Clark and Taylor. They approached us last of all the internet service providers, only after they had received endorsements from Clark and Taylor County. They're looking at serving, if you were to draw an imaginary line on Highway O up and down, and they were looking at everything west of that in Marathon County, and looking to build out from their existing. Bertram, which is a firm that's doing work in Shawano County, and I think they're looking at Langlade and others, wants to come in from the east, and they want to look and submit proposals for all of Marathon County. And then Bug Tussle is also interested in building out. Again, they've expressed interest in submitting applications for all of it. They may have multiple applications. Charter is interested in the program, but they are corporately concerned about some of the provisions relative to affordability and some of the requirements, and have not given us detailed proposals. They had asked for a blanket endorsement. Upon review, the task force recommended that we endorse 3 out of the 5 companies, Bertram, Mosaic, and Bug Tussle. They did not feel comfortable with the lack of information from Charter, and there were concerns over Frontier's proposal only serving portions, not all of western Marathon County, and quite honestly, some of the concerns relative to their track record in the county, relative to the PSC grant. So what you have before you today is 3 separate resolutions based upon recommendations from the Public Service Commission to endorse the projects for Mosaic on the western side of the county, Bug Tussle and Bertram for the entire county. Submit that. That will carry with it 7 points in the review and evaluation process, and let the Public Service Commission go through each of those 113 project units and determine who is the best provider. We have somewhat limited information relative to what the plans are. They're still working on it, the internet service providers. And again, we felt as if, based upon our discussions with them, that they could do the job if they were awarded, that they had the support staff and the crews that could get it done. They can do the build-outs between now and 2029. I think there's a potential for a 1-year expansion. So it's not something that's going to happen right away. But our endorsement, again, carries with it points. Next Wednesday, there will be a joint meeting of the Eastern and Western Towns Association for the express purpose of hearing the proposals from the internet service providers and the towns can then make a determination on whether or not they will endorse or support one or multiple providers in that area. But again, our recommendation was to support the application for all three. And in the past, we have on several occasions, well, on a couple of occasions, endorsed multiple providers for providing service to the same area. Most recently, Charter and Frontier serving the area around your district in southwestern Marathon County. Unfortunately, neither of those grant applications were successful. And again, the thought is that any of the companies could do it. We don't have the details on the submittals. We don't have the full understanding of what the costs are, but we thought that was the best way to try to advance internet service throughout the county.
Questions? Supervisor Jensen.
No question, just maybe a couple things to add from the task force presentations. So each of the providers that are shown here for endorsement, they all presented a high degree of confidence in the ability to execute on the plan. So, picking 3 out of 5, that's really what we went with. Many did share their competitive or comparable consumer plans on fees and bandwidth and things like that. They are subject to some requirements based on the program, but nonetheless, they shared those, and that was a contributing factor. It was expressed in the meeting that the county has a low or almost non-existent appetite for contributing dollars to these projects. So that was, openly shared. And then I guess the last thing I had noted was, our endorsement doesn't obligate anything from the county to the providers other than us just signaling that we do, have verbal support for them in this program and presenting that to the PSC.
So one question in that the endorsement that we're giving, that we would potentially give with these resolutions, does not shut down the other 2 from proceeding. It's simply these 3 would get the additional points, and it shows that there's support from the county level.
That is correct.
Or next week, the local level.
That is correct. And in Charter, I had a number of conversations with Charter, even subsequent to the meeting. They are still on a corporate level nationwide evaluating it. The regulations in Wisconsin are somewhat different than some of the other states, which is why they're being cautious relative to submitting an application. It could well be that they put together a proposal that the county board could consider, but right now we don't have that. And I do want to reiterate what Supervisor Jensen said. We are not contributing any local dollars toward these efforts. I think we've been asked to help with potentially work within the right-of-way, some of the permitting, and potentially if they need a hub, they may approach us separately for access to county property to build a hub. Those are the only requests that we've had. And again, we've made it clear that the appetite on the county board for subsidies is somewhat limited at this time.
All right, thank you for that. Supervisor Jensen, go ahead.
The other thing I'll add to that too is, we thought that having some, new potential partners in the area, it's only going to foster competition as well. So when you look at Bertram, Mosaic, them coming in and wanting to play in the area where we already have Charter, Frontier, Bug Tussle, that's only going to foster more competition and help out our residents as well with more options.
Okay, very good. Additional comments or questions?
Yeah, I just want to add two quick things. We haven't seen their proposal because they haven't actually done it. But as John mentioned, they have to at least commit 25%. That doesn't mean that they might commit more, but they have to do 25%, and they're asking that's the minimum. So the PSC could, let's say two of them apply for the same place, and one of them says they'll give 25% of the cost, and the other one says 30% of the cost. That also might be a part of the decision-making process that the PSC does. But we haven't seen that because they don't actually have to submit these until the 25th of February. But then, of March. No, February. And then the other thing I just wanted to mention is the PSC can select, even if they apply for the whole thing, like the Bug Tussle and Mosaic have said that, Bertram have said that they're going to do, the PSC could pick and choose and say, we're giving you, remember we talked last time, Aaron talked last time, they had that whole map, there's 113 I think it's 113 areas, sections. They might give 50 of them to one end and the rest to the other one. So we will also wouldn't have any control over that. But those are part of the decision-making process that the PSC has.
The intent is to present the resolutions for a vote at the informational meeting. And the reason is, in particular, Mosaic had requested having that endorsement early so that they can prepare their application and submit it. So it will be up for both presentation discussion and a vote based upon the discussions with Chair Gibbs.
Okay, thank you for that. So I'd be looking to entertain a motion for this endorsement for the ISPs. Okay, Supervisor Jensen with the motion. Seconded by Supervisor Gisselman. Any further discussion?
If for the minutes, if we can make sure that the motion includes the endorsement of Mosaic, Bertram, and Bug Tessel in the minutes.
Sure, so noted. Okay, thank you. Any further discussion? All right, hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye, opposed? A motion carries. Thank you for your work on that. Moving on to item 8A, are there any items, announcements, or future agenda item requests? Okay, then move on to 8B. Next meeting is Thursday, March 6th, also noting that the site trip would be on Monday, February 17th. Commissioner Griesbach.
I would suggest maybe we are planning at this point to do a full board presentation on March 20th. I would think it probably would be a great interest if the March meeting may be a joint meeting again with finance to go over what we'll be presenting at the March 20th meeting. So maybe you want to look at I know last time we did it in the afternoon, or John and Randy can work through a time, but I would suggest a joint meeting for the March meeting.
Okay, so noted. All right, then I'll be moving on then to item 9. Motion by Supervisor Gisselman to adjourn. Second by Supervisor Hardinger. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye, opposed, motion carries. We're done.
Construction guy, I think